Hello and welcome to another Frontline update for the Ukraine war. This is an ATP geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, and this is for the 17th of February 2023. Just a little talk about what the ISWs state on their sort of daily report before they get to the front line. The one that speaks out is this: Ukrainian officials stated that Russian forces aim to capture Bakhmut by the first anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, which would require a significantly higher rate of Russian advance than anything seen for months. So, Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin has recently stated that he expects Wagner Group fighters to encircle Bakhmut by March or April. Um, so that's a different time frame to what's potentially has been requested by Putin. Prigozhin's pragmatic assessments of Russian advances in the Bakhmut area have generally been closer to tactical realities than assessments forecasting rapid Russian advances. Russian forces do not appear to be quickening their rate of advance around Bakhmut and are unlikely to meet this reported February the 24th goal. Depends whether Putin really did say that. It seems fairly plausible, but we don't know for sure. That's what the Ukrainian intelligence is saying. But it seems unlikely that that's realistic, especially given to the south and east of Bakhmut, there's a bit of pushback from the Ukrainians. Okay, well, let's not jump the gun here. Let's go to Kupiansk, to the northeast sector, Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna front line. And we're going to start in Kupiansk up here before going down to Svatove and beyond. There has been some movement. If we look at this area around just to the north of Kupiansk, so Kupiansk is here. Uh, sorry, just to give you an idea of where we are. We've got Svatove here, Kupiansk there, and we're going to Dvorichne and Dvorichna. So Dvorichne looks like it's under Russian control. There's talk about Khrennikivka being under Russian control now. So Syriac Maps has claimed that Russians now control Khrennikivka. But we don't see that represented in pro-Ukrainian sources, or indeed the ISW that reports on both sides here. They say the Center for Defense Strategies also reported, this is a Ukrainian source, reported that Russian forces entered Liman Pershi. I just find that interesting because there are these different claims about Liman Pershi and whether the Russians are in there, whether it's a grey zone. We've got like Defmon thinks still thinks actually that the Russians have Sinkivka. This was due to a claim from a week or so ago, but no other sources seem to have Sinkivka under Russian control. So I've just go along with most other sources here, but ISW says Liman Pershi, the Russian forces entered Liman Pershi, advanced to the Sinkivka area and attack Mazyutivka. So Mazyutivka, I think, is here, just there. So that is a small settlement on the other side. So this straight line here is a railway line that has been a sort of defensive line for the Ukrainians. However, they have apparently lost Kivka, and that railway line is kind of breached, if you like. The ISW continues. Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian and Ukrainian forces continue to fight for control of Kivka, although Syriac Map says they have it, and near Sinkivka. Another Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces are testing a remote-controlled machine gun system equipped with a self-destruction system near Svatove. So that's something a little bit different. If we go to Rebar says nothing on Twitter today, but on Telegram says very little about, well, nothing about Kupiansk and Svatove. Talks a lot about the strikes yesterday, about how oil storage facility, fuel storage facility was hit, oil refinery, substations, auto transformers hit, all the way over to Lviv in the west, and so on and so forth. But interestingly, the energy wasn't really shut down in Ukraine yesterday. So although there were some hits, it didn't seem to have as big an impact as maybe the Russians were hoping. But otherwise, nothing on this area. So we'll come out of there just to say that Russians appear to be advancing in certain areas of this Kupiansk theatre. And as we move down, not really a lot of talk on anywhere around Svatove, Kuzmivka, and we come further down to the Kreminna area. Poulet Volant's map kind of starts around the Svatove area, doesn't show Ukrainians pushing in Novosibirsk, just that remains kind of stable. And the Russians are pushing in Kolomychika towards Stelimakivka, and then nothing else for Poulet Volant. And then the map comes down to the Kreminna area where we see the usual kind of pressure everywhere around this front line. The ISW says Russian forces continue to conduct ground attacks near Kreminna. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces repelled Russian attacks near Bilorivka and in the Serebryanska forest south of Kreminna. But the Ukrainians have been pushed back 500 to 1,000 meters near Kreminna. That's as according to the Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategies. The Russians have entered the fields to the east of Yampolivka. So let's put that on my map. You got Yampolivka here, so it could well be that the Russians have advanced in this area. I've not changed my maps, but it could well be that that is the case, and that they are pressuring pretty much everywhere and They pushed the Ukrainians back a further, sort of up to 1,000 meters, somewhere in this area, but it's difficult to say exactly where. I've actually literally just updated my map just south of Ploshchanka. The Russians have actually gained a little bit of territory over there during the course of the last week. So this is that gully area that there's a lot of talk about with Rebar and others. Indeed, as Rebar says, there are sporadic battles in the Liman area near the Balka-Zuravka and Yampolivka. Russian troops are launching artillery strikes on enemy positions, not giving them an opportunity to counterattack. Balka-Zuravka is indeed that area just down there. As far as I can work out, it's not really marked on any map, but that's where I see it. So anyway, as we come further down south to the sort of Bilorivka area, we have let's come out and see what Defmon says. So, Kreminna, Russian MOD, this is pro-Russian source, Russian MOD claim they hit the Ukrainians near Dobrova and Kazumurna with a TOS-1A, that's a thermobaric munition, and artillery. The Ukrainian Center for Defense Studies claims Russian forces managed to push the Ukrainians back a bit west of Dobrova. Shelling also reported in the area of Zidlivka, which does not make much sense to me. So he says shelling in that area. Well, is that if the Russians are claiming that shelling there, then as in they are being shelled there, then that would be odd. There's other things going on. Or if the Russians are claiming they are shelling there, that's even more odd because they're much further west than there. But anyway, possibly some movements to the west of Kreminna and a larger sort of, with Defmon he has this like definite line here and then where they're sort of pushing to. So it could be that this salient is somewhat larger in the area west of Kreminna. And then, of course, pressure on Bilorivka as ever and pressure down in the Serebryanska forest. Indeed, what he says about Bilorivka, I'm sure he had a Bilorivka claim there. Oh, yeah, here. The AFU repulsed attacks in the area of Bilorivka and the Serebryansky forest. So, yeah, all the normal stuff there. We'll start moving on towards Bakhmut. So as we come down past Bilorivka, past Nokomyanska, Shpirna, Berestova, to the southern Bilorivka, we look at this area just north of Soledar. And there aren't a huge amount of claims coming out. Let's see what ISW says first of all. So geolocated footage shows special forces, elements of the Ukrainian main intelligence directorate GUR striking Russian positions in Pereskivivka, indicating that Russian forces have made marginal advances just northeast of Bakhmut. Russian mill bloggers emphasize that heavy fighting is ongoing in Pereskivivka and that Russian forces are trying to envelop the settlement from two sides. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Wagner group fighters advanced west of Soledar and reached Zalizhnyanska. And I'll show you all this. Two mill bloggers claim to be in Bakhmut itself and remarked that they personally observed fierce fighting on the northeastern outskirts of Bakhmut as Wagner group forces will try to cut remaining Ukrainian supply routes into the town. One Russian source claimed that the Wagner group resumed an offensive on Ivanivska. And I'll mention, I'll get to that in a second. So there's pressure towards Fedorivka and around Vasyukivka just here. This is north of Soledar. What they're talking about there is this move towards Zalizhnyansky and possibly across the M03 or the E40 road here. Still differing opinions on whether that has been crossed or not or interdicted. Syriac maps here seem to indicate, I'm not sure that it, well, actually, they did have it interdicted further down this way previously, as I have it on my map. And in Paraskevivka itself, the hospital, they say, has been taken. And, there are advances on the north and the east. Now, that geolocated GUR attack, I think, was somewhere at the north here. Yeah, so you can see that Paraskevivka is getting slowly encircled. My map represents what Syriac has there. Other maps are pretty similar. There is this kind of almost triangular situation going on there with Paraskevivka under an awful lot of pressure. Defmon, Ukrainian source, says both Deep State and Rebar claims the Russian advances in the area north of Bakhmut. So that's in this area there of Zalizhnyansky that I've just shown you. Status seems mostly unchanged south of Bakhmut. The Ukrainian forces continue to hold the Russians away from the T-0504 road. So that's this one there going past or through Ivanivska. Poulet-Volant's map shows pretty much the same, other than that the Russians have not crossed this highway there, and shows that in the east, the Ukrainians are still pressuring the Russians on the eastern outskirts. Now, that claim on the eastern outskirts, I haven't changed my map at all because there hasn't been many other sort of claims concerning this. But sorry, just to show you his map. So you've got the road coming west to east here, and then this other road going perpendicular. That seems to be Maximienko Street there, and the Russians are pushed pretty much back to there. You've got the waste sorting plant, I think, just there. So on my map, that would be the Russians being pushed back almost to Maximienko Street here. Poulet-Volant's the only sort of map. Well, actually, let's go and have a look at Deep State, see what their map states. Yeah, so Deep State still has the Russians, 4 to 5 streets inwards there, which is broadly what I have on my map. So mine and Deep State are fairly similar. Poulet-Volant has the Russians pushed back in that eastern area. So I just want to wait to see if that is the case, but not much else claimed about Bakhmut, really. Rebar pro-Russian source says to the north of Bakhmut, Russian forces managed to storm Ukrainian positions in the Vasyukivka and Rozdalivka line. The Ukrainians retreated to reserve lines while the Wagner PMC group succeeded in consolidating their position. And that's all they say, which is to say that according to Rebar, and Rebar been really thin on the ground. I don't know if Rebar been very busy last couple of days, but yeah, they're saying that there's pressure around here. And that they pushed the Ukrainians back and then consolidated, but says nothing else about Bakhmut at all. It appears like the Russians are still pushed back around here. And no reports only really says anything about Bakhmut. So today, a short one, Bakhmut is holding out. In the north, there is fighting around the M03, but contrary to some rumors, it's still under Ukrainian control. So again, that's to say that this road here has not been interdicted as Syriac maps and mine. That's what Syriac maps has claimed, but no report saying that's not true. Central Paraskevivka is Ukrainian. The north is Russian. Russian troops tried to reach Zalizhnyansky. So that's to say that Russian troops are trying to take that small settlement, but the north of Paraskevivka is Russian under Russian control, which is exactly what I have. But the center of it remains Ukrainian. And then he goes on to say very little changes across the board on the eastern direction. Yes, locally there is intense fighting, and Russia throws a lot of equipment at it, but the territorial gain is 0-0. Since tonight, Russia's been trying to take Bilorivka and is attacking from 3 sides. So that's basically those two are the only things that no reports talks about, but obviously we've gone past Bilorivka already. So really, we'll go on to Avdivka now. So that's coming out of Bakhmut. Slightly quieter days like this play into Ukrainian hands because they can consolidate. It means that Russians are less likely to achieve their goals of taking Bakhmut by whatever goal they've been set, if that Putin goal is true, whether that's the end of March, these kind of quieter days play into the Ukrainian hands rather than Russian hands. And it just means that Ukrainians intend to grind out Russian losses in this attritional battle, where the attacking forces are more likely to lose more than the defending forces. So this would play into Ukrainian calculations, if indeed, it is happening as I'm claiming there. Okay, now going on to Avdivka. Damn, I do this every day. So Defmon actually has a bit of extra stuff on Bakhmut that's worthy of just a little bit of thought here. So Ukrainian CDS, so Center for Defense Studies, stated that the Ukrainians have started withdrawing to the west of Bakhmutovka River. I've not seen any visual evidence supporting this claim, but the city is also under lockdown. So this is the idea that they're moving west, but on the same time, people like Vuhledar are saying they're actually pushing the Russians to the east. So, there's a bit of disagreement there. A withdrawal west of the Bakhmutovka River is something I have mentioned previously as an indicator of preparations for a withdrawal from the city. I do, however, think there is an immediate need for the Ukrainians to not think there's an immediate need for them to leave the city. It's not too late to defend Bakhmut. A Ukrainian Telegram channel report Krasnohora is still in Ukrainian control. That's surely not true. They also state that they are pushing the Russians back trench by trench in the south. They use other word for Russians, and multiple reports of Wagner being seen less and less at the front around Bakhmut by Magyar, among others. I find it interesting how Rebar keep claiming all attacks are done by Wagner still. Magyar also states that fighting around Bakhmut has been relatively slow during the day. The fighting was more active during the night due to AFU nighttime operations. So the Ukrainians do have an advantage. They need to exploit every advantage they have. And if they have more thermal imaging than the Russians, they need to use that hugely, which it looks like they are. Whoever has the equipment and training to operate at night have a huge advantage. Absolutely. Absolutely. You've got to exploit every advantage you can when it comes to attritional warfare. If you don't have these, if it is literally man against man on the streets, you've got to find those advantages. Okay, so actually finally getting to Donetsk, the Ukrainians repulsed attacks in the area of Avdivka, Vodyany, Pervomaisky, Marinka, Novomykhailivka. Looks like continued pressure all over this area. Poulet Volant's map of Avdivka is interesting. I mean, it shows the pressure from the different areas. There's apparently repelled attacks around Pervomaisky. Some claims from Russian mill bloggers in ISW saying that they've made some gains in Pervomaisky, but that's again not unusual. It's actually got some trench lines marked on this map, so he's done a bit of work on that. I thought there's more trench lines just north of Vodyany here, so I don't know how accurate these marks are. But yeah, it's worth having a little look at that map to see, see that added detail. But other than that, yeah, not too much to report in Avdivka. And then we come down to Marinka. In terms of Marinka, so just south of Avdivka, Marinka here, the all the mappers seem to agree now that the Russians have this area of agricultural warehousing, this piggery and whatnot, to the north of Marinka. Indeed, Rebar, that's all it talks about, which is the north of, in the north of Marinka, the Russian army soldiers have reached the agricultural buildings near Hyolochichna Street. With the artillery support, the mopping up of nearby warehouses and outbuildings in the town is underway. So this, yeah, that's that area there, and this is the idea. And ISW talks about this, which is the attempt to bypass the center of town by flanking it. Still some disagreement over whether this kind of northern district is under Ukrainian or Russian control. Deep State doesn't have that. Other Syriac maps does have it, so on and so forth. But yeah, definitely looks to be this idea of doing the obvious kind of flank, and then if they can break that G lock or main supply route, and obviously this one as well, then they'll be causing the Ukrainians some trouble, because if let's have a little look there. Thank you very much. That's a nice tea delivery. You got a lot of time for that. That's my partner's daughter. Brilliant. So if they can break that line, and even if they interdict it right back here, it's very difficult to supply Marinka then. So it's so difficult to go through the center as they've seen because it's been like this since 2014, is it? So or very many years. So Marinka is a tough nut for the Russians to crack, and I think flanking is the only option for them. And that brings us down to Vuhledar. Again, quick reminder for those newbies, Vuhledar is this area that's on high ground, has higher buildings where they have line of sight down to Pavlivka and Makilska. Russians have tried to attack in two directions up through these dachas, they're called, these kind of more rural cottages and whatnot, and attack up through those dachas from two directions, and they were stopped basically a number of times. They lost huge amounts of troops and mechanized equipment. There are mechanized equipment graveyards, I think, all over this kind of area here. And actually, one of the main aspects of the Ukrainian defense here is that they've heavily mined this area. It appears, not just, I would imagine, they definitely mined around that area, but I imagine they'd be sending out reconnaissance groups, and they would have mined in a larger area. Who knows? Maybe even, I mean, if I was in charge of this kind of setup, I'd be mining everywhere around here because they mining. You're not going to lose troops. You really, if you can do it successfully, you go out at night, set these mines up, and then get back in, and the mechanized equipment just runs into them and has huge amounts of trouble. So we saw video footage of 4 vehicles getting taken out in virtually the same spot by mines. They just try to go in different directions, bang, different direction, bang, 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 and there you go. And these guys are sitting back, not being involved in that at all. So the mines are a really useful mechanism, but they're also been particularly useful around this Vuhledar area. But what do we have to say? Well, the ISW says Russian forces conducted ground attacks in western Donetsk. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian troops attacked near Vuhledar, Prishchivka, and Novosilka. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian troops attacked near, Prechestivka, and on the outskirts of Vuhledar. Another Russian source posted footage of Russian forces firing a TOS-1A thermobaric artillery system, reportedly in the Dacha area near the outskirts of Vuhledar. Now, that's interesting because one TOS-1A thermobaric artillery piece was taken out in this area, so perhaps they have a couple of them working, or at least they've got at least one left. As you can see, this is where the Russians are attacking towards at the moment as well. So there's this activity to the west of Vuhledar. And again, it might be a case of, as we've seen previously, if they can't take Vuhledar itself, then there's Novomykhailivka that allows them to get onto the high ground and then come down there. And if they can attack and take Prechestivka, then again, it's about effectively flanking Vuhledar. Okay, let's move on. As we look at Poulet-Volant's map here, you can see the activity around Vuhledar, Prechestivka, but then it's to the west of Velika Novosilka towards Novosilka itself. So on my map, that's as we come out. Then it's skirmishes towards Novosilka there. No particular news about activity around the Zaporizhia Oblast here. The ISW reports that Russians claim to have taken out a Ukrainian vessel in the Dnipro, some kind of landing craft. Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that Russian artillery units of the Southern Military District destroyed a Ukrainian naval vessel during an attempted landing of a Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group in an unspecified area on the left bank of the Dnipro River. Left bank being this one coming down because you see it in the direction the water flows. Then there's been all this activity around. I talked about it a little bit in my news, so a bit of kind of strategy here. So if you watch reporting from Ukraine, they do. He does a section on the fact that there have been air defense systems that have been taken out in this general area. So you've got some stuff around Skadovsk, Kalanchak, and Amiansk. All these 3 areas have had HIMARS hits, and Chapelinka actually as well. And then you've had artillery being hit around here as well. So there have been all these hits of possibly even 4, like this morning I reported 4, potentially 4 air defense systems taken out. So if you're thinking that's like S300s or books or OSAs or whatever, all these different they're fairly expensive and they're fairly useful and they're much more difficult to replace than say a piece of artillery, and they will cover quite a large area. Now, the best air defense systems for the Russians will have maybe a 200-kilometer range, like maybe an S-400 or something like that. So you might have to start hitting stuff really far back here if you want to start using aviation around the front line here. But the question is whether they actually have those range on their air defense systems, whether they have the very best systems or not, what variation of each system. So some of these air defense pieces have a much shorter range, maybe for 40 kilometers or something like that. So if you have a system there and it's got a 40-kilometer range, then actually, it's only going to reach there. The point being that if they've started to take out air defense systems in this general area, so say that they've taken out all the air defense systems they can find in this area to here, then and they're fairly sure they haven't got the best S400s or something in this kind of maybe in this wider range, then it could be that the Ukrainians could start using. This is just me speculating, right? I just from the top of my head, and I probably don't know what I'm talking about. But if you might be able to start seeing, a use of s- uh, air support to support the troops in some kind of, attempted crossing of the Dnipro or some kind of activity. It seems that there is a more methodical approach to taking out air defense systems here than I've seen elsewhere. Is my point. And if that is if that could just be luck, it could just be like random, or it could be that they are trying to take out air defense systems in this area so that they can get some kind of air superiority in a very localized manner to have close air support so that they can do something across the Kherson. I don't know. It might be complete nonsense, and it might just be random that they've taken out some air defense systems in a greater concentration in this area than anywhere else. And I'm talking complete rubbish, but I'd be interested to see what you guys think. Anyway, that's a frontline update for the 17th. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support. All the ways you can support the channel are in the description below. Thank you so much to the members of the channel. I'll give you a shout out in my next video. I really appreciate all the help people give me on Buy Me a Coffee and by PayPal and whatnot. Thank you. It's tea, obviously, because it's a better drink. But toodle pips, and pinky out. I struggle to hold that with one hand and keep my pinky out because the cup's too heavy or something. Anyway, toodle pips. See you later.